And what that means is that we have certain obligations to enforce the laws that are in place, even if we think that in many cases the results may be tragic.
How many women aren't being How many children aren't dying making that journey? How many women and children aren't being trafficked into this country every day? How many known suspected terrorists aren't just walking across that border? President Trump and this administration is saving thousands of lives every month. Hard stop.
Meantime, you got a battle now erupting over the investigation of the shooting of Alex Pretty. The dispute over exactly what happened, setting up the latest fight in the federal government. David Spunt, he's on that story, reporting now from Washington. And David, hello to you on this now.
Well, hi, Bill. Good morning. President Trump announcing just a couple of hours ago he's sending Border Czar Tom Homan to run operations in Minnesota, reporting directly to him. Listen, there's a lot of internal frustration among members of DHS, specifically Customs and Border Protection, ICE, also Department of Justice over the killing of Alex Pretty, the second American citizen to die this month at the hands of law enforcement. That frustration is growing. Our colleague Bill Malugin hearing from more than half a dozen sources involved in immigration enforcement who say the frustration stems from DHS officials on TV putting out statements to describe Mr. Pretty as a domestic terrorist who was there to, quote, inflict maximum damage, end quote, or federal agents conducting a, quote, massacre, even though the video angles show the opposite story. DHS responding to Bill saying we have seen.
See, what you have here, and this is a perfect move by Donald Trump, moving Tom Homan in. I think we can all agree that Tom Homan was made for this moment in Minnesota. He's exactly what we need. And as you see this, this environment within Minnesota completely falling apart, I mean, there's a bunch of finger pointing, and that would be expected. But what you're starting to hear is also some finger pointing at Kristi Noem. I don't think she deserves it. I think it's just natural to start to get frustrated as ultimately the local officials, which would be Mayor Jacob Frey and Tim Walz and A.G. Allison, are doing everything they can to make this a firestorm. Right? To escalate this situation versus to de-escalate. I think the other person that is not part of this story that we're hearing is ultimately the commissioner of the police for the city of Minneapolis. He's been very pro Tim Walz throughout this whole thing. Anything that Tim Walz says, he's going to parrot. But what you will see, and I think the perfect comparison is within the red state. So let's use Florida for an example. What you see out of the department heads of the local police departments is complete alignment with ICE, with Border Patrol, and with Governor DeSantis, right? You're seeing the same ultimately in this blue state with Walz, with alignment, but where you're not seeing the alignment to the federal authorities is at the local level, specifically obviously, Mayor Frey, no surprise. But the big surprise and where we need to see the pull through is with the Minneapolis police commissioner. I think he has an awful lot to answer for because he's been doing everything he can to ultimately leave ICE and Border Patrol unprotected. We see multiple examples of that.
A highly coordinated campaign of violence against our law enforcement. This individual committed a federal crime while armed as he obstructed an active law enforcement operation. As with any situation that's evolving, we will work to give swift, accurate information to the American people as more information becomes available. Now, FBI Director Kash Patel says that the Bureau is assisting the Department of Homeland Security, who is leading the investigation on the ground, involving the agent that shot and killed Mr. Pretty over the weekend. Patel said this about Pretty, who was found with a loaded handgun. Watch.
No one who wants to be peaceful shows up at a protest with a firearm that is loaded with 2 full magazines. That is not a peaceful protest, and you do not get to touch law enforcement. You do that anywhere, this FBI is going to be leading the charge to arrest those.
And of course, it's simply too early to get any word from the Justice Department on any potential charges, if there are charges at all involving this unnamed officer. But right now, too early in the investigation.
All right, David, more to come.
So I'm curious what you think as we kind of progress with this story, right? Do you see that person that was taken down, right, by ICE and ultimately expired? Do you see him as being a professional agitator? I think there's plenty of evidence that if he's not, many others there are. We've gotten signal group chats. We've gotten a number of examples, potentially leading all the way up to the highest levels of the Minneapolis and Minnesota leadership, i.e. A.G. Ellison, Walz, some of the assistant governors as well are now getting rumored to have mentions of coordinating some of these efforts. We don't know, but there's no doubt that this is not a grassroots protest, and there's no doubt that many of those agitators are paid, almost professional.
On this, certainly, David Salent, big story. Thank you, sir. Dana's got more now.
And want to bring in Alpha News journalist Liz Collins. She is based in Minnesota. Liz, how about this news that President Trump is sending Tom Homan there? Is that welcome news in Minnesota? Do you think it will make a difference?
Yeah, I was speaking actually with a couple police officers on the state and local level, Dana, this morning, and they welcome this news as yet more vandalism they saw overnight to a Minneapolis Hilton hotel property. Vehicles outside that hotel also damaged by rioters last night as this weekend of chaos continued. Now,
again, what Liz is getting at here, right, this Alpha News journalist, is that you have your middle of the pack police officers at the state and local level. They're absolutely aligned. Where we're seeing the disjointed alignment is at the top.
Greater issue is, even if there is an investigation that ultimately proves that at the time of the shooting it was legally justified, I don't think that even matters at this point, because there is so much outrage and concern around what is happening in the city.
In the wake of the shooting death of Alex Preddy on Saturday, as we heard that shooting now under investigation at both the state and the federal level as well, President Trump acknowledging that. But there is also a call from Minnesota Law Enforcement Labor Services for an emergency state and federal summit on immigration enforcement to establish what state law enforcement leaders call clear, coordinated policies for enforcement and detainers, saying what is taking place now is unsustainable. We saw that again last night. A lot of frustration, I can say, from my sources.
Again, where do we see, if you're looking at some of the B-roll off to the left here, or to the left of Liz, to our right, what does this look like? This looks exactly like Portland, right, just last year, with professional agitators, primarily white, right, that are being doing everything they can to impede the federal authorities in what they're trying to do, which is to obviously take hardened criminals off the streets. But as you're looking at this B-roll, again, these are not just your everyday grassroots neighbors that are upset. These are a certain age demographic, and quite frankly, and I've seen a number of reports on this as well, that these people are getting bussed in and flown in from all over the country. So how passionate are they really, and how what's their point of origination, right? They're not Minneapolis citizens. These are citizens from all over the country, and potentially even, this is the key piece, outside the country. What foreign entities are funding this? I guarantee you there are some, guaranteed. And that's where Pam Bondi and Kash Patel have to get involved.
As you had federal agents calling for backup, and Minneapolis police were nowhere to be seen as they were under attack at this hotel, actually getting into the hotel, spray painting it, and leaving behind, of course, thousands of dollars in damage. Right. Yet again,
does this look like peaceful protests?
That they really need to break up these groups that are following their every move and tracking them, and they don't see things changing until something like that happens.
Liz, for this possible summit that you're talking about, would that include the possibility of the state saying, okay, this is where we can work with the federal government to try to find criminal, illegal aliens to get them to leave?
Right. They're saying that something needs to happen at the level of the Hennepin and Ramsey County jails, going ahead and letting ICE do their work there and taking prisoners from there that are here illegally. But the messaging is...
I don't know if you picked up on this, but this is a critical point as well, that the local officials haven't been allowing the federal authorities access to their jails, so that therefore Border Patrol and ICE are on the streets trying to pick up the hardened illegal criminals that are being let out of jail or not in jail. But where's the honeypot for some of these individuals that they're seeking? in the jails. They're not being allowed in those. And that's what needs to change immediately.
Really also a problem not only from the governor, but also the Hennepin County attorney. We obtained a memo just on Friday, Dana. They're talking about how they're kind of offering support to officers to investigate reports of alleged criminal conduct by federal agents in your community. So sort of this line in the sand that they're drawing is not helping anyone. And I can tell you there is a lot of frustration. They're hoping that Tom Homan will come here and help to turn this around.
Okay, let me play for you a little bit from Governor Walz and Mayor Frey over the weekend.
This should be of deep concern for you no matter what town you're in America, because your town could be next. Your liberties, your freedoms could be sacrificed because of what this administration is doing.
So now we've got 2 Minnesotans dead. We didn't had time to start telling Renee's story of a poet and a mother and a bright spirit, and now we're telling Alex's story. What's the plan?
This is important, and I want to make this clear because there's 2 points. First, there's no question that all of us feel deep sympathies because no Americans should be killed, right? Let's just start there with this gentleman that was killed on Sunday, and obviously the younger lady about 10 days ago. Let's make that extremely clear. But what you don't hear, and this is a key point that I want to make, you didn't hear it out of the mayor, and you're not going to hear it out of Tim Walz, is what about talking about the victims that were killed or assaulted by these individuals, the American citizens that were affected by these illegal criminals that are on the streets of Minneapolis? What about those victims? There's plenty of examples. There was just an example in North Carolina over the weekend where a young couple was killed in a DUI accident because an illegal alien was driving drunk and plowed into them. This was a younger couple in their 20s, right? Just looked like perfect college couple. So what about them, Tim Walz, right? Because again, I want to make this clear. The 2 individuals, both the younger lady from 10 days ago and this last gentleman, none of us want to see that. And all of us have their families in our prayers because we don't want that. But what we also are not seeing is an acknowledgement of the people, the victims that were affected and are affected and will be affected by all of these illegal alien criminals walking the streets of Minneapolis.
Plan, Donald Trump. What is the plan?
Oh, I think you know the plan.
What do we need to do to get these federal agents out of our state?
I'm wondering if you can give us a sense of the feeling amongst citizens from all across the ideological perspective and spectrum on the Preddy killing over the weekend and where things are now, especially with President Trump saying, okay, I'm sending Homan in, he's going to report to me, and we're going to investigate everything.
Yeah, I will say that, over the weeks, we've seen these continued coordinated efforts continue to grow. Obviously, there was peaceful protests that have happened in the wake of these deaths. But just from a law enforcement perspective, there's frustration that these agitators are not arrested immediately. On the radio last night, again, Minneapolis police airing that everyone eventually who was arrested, they'll be photographed and released from that hotel riot. So this will, sort of be on repeat. But again, on the federal and state level, they have acknowledged there will be an investigation into this shooting death of Alex Preddy, which, is welcome news. We've heard that from.
Again, keep in mind that the numbers right now are just north of 3,000 criminals were caught by ICE and Border Patrol in the last 3 weeks or so in Minneapolis. Those are great numbers, and that's exactly what we want to hear. But you know where those numbers are just as almost equivalent to that same output? In Houston, obviously Texas, red state, right? In Florida, there was a huge deportation effort that had numbers very similar to this. But you didn't see these blockades and these no-go zones and these violent protesters in any of those instances. Ask yourself why.
If you resist lawful orders, you're going to jail. Let me be very clear about that. If you block an intersection or a roadway in Brevard County, you are going to jail. If you flee arrest, you're going to go to jail tired because we are going to run you down and put you in jail. If you try to mob rule a car in Brevard County, gathering around it, refusing to let the driver leave, in our county, you're most likely going to get run over and dragged across the street. If you spit on us, you're going to the hospital and in jail. If you hit one of us, you're going to the hospital and jail, and most likely get bitten by one of our big, beautiful dogs that we have here. If you throw a brick, a firebomb, or point a gun at one of our deputies, we will be notifying your family where to collect your remains at, because we will keep the graveyard dead.
So Tom Homan is going to be storming the streets of Minneapolis in just hours. I think that he's exactly, really is the worst case scenario for Jacob Frey, the mayor, and for Tim Walz, because Tom Homan's not going to put up with their BS. He's going to enforce federal law, and he's going to make sure that the federal authorities get access to the local jails, which has been one of the linchpin sites where the local authorities have not allowed the authorities to go into. The second thing that Homan is absolutely going to do is he's going to be counter-messaging Tim Walz and Jacob Frey step for step. They needed him in this mix because ultimately we don't want this to continue. We don't want to see anybody else affected like we did with the Pretty gentleman over the weekend. We want to ultimately see deportations and see criminals taken off the streets. So getting access to the jails is going to be critical, and where Homan is going to be focused at is with the local police, making sure that they're, meaning the Minneapolis commissioner, state police or Minneapolis city commissioner, is not going to be aligning himself and obstructing justice and not supporting the efforts of ICE and Border Patrol. I'm curious what you think. What do you think of Tom Homan getting into Minneapolis? Is this a good thing, or is this going to continue the de-escalation and the violence that we're seeing propagated in Minneapolis? Let me know what you think in the comments down below. If you haven't subscribed yet to America First Alerts, please do so. We'd love to have you along for the ride, and we'll see you in the next video.
We won! Okay, let's go.
We won.